how to make a competitive profile. And so I will be sharing a slide of this webinar. So please let me know if you can see the slide. Wait. It should be here. Okay, can you all see the slide?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, and we're from Femme For Education. So I am Kalira, the Director of Programs and Events at Femme For Education, and Femme For Education is a nonprofit organization dedicated in providing free resources for girls in many aspects, including STEAM, business, laws, politics, art, activisms, and many more. And so for the webinar today, we will be welcoming 4 guest speakers from 4 different universities. So the first speaker will be Janene.
Hi, everybody. I'm Janene. I was born and raised here in Southern California. I'm actually from San Diego. I'm going to be a member of Stanford 25 because I actually just put in my or confirmed my request for a gap year. So that's exciting. If anybody has any questions about a gap year, feel free to ask them at the end or reach out to me. I will be majoring in public policy or international relations, although I'm not really too sure which one yet. I do a lot of volunteer work with Hobie and the San Diego Zoo Corps, and in my free time, I love to read, write, and play the viola. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we'll move to the second speaker, which is Jennora.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennora. I'm from New York City, specifically Brooklyn, but my high school is in Manhattan, so I would say I basically lived in both Manhattan and Brooklyn. I will be attending Brown University in the spring because of Brown's plans for first years. But yeah, I'm really interested in studying maybe sociology, literary arts. I haven't really decided what exactly I want to study yet, but that's part of the reason why I chose Brown, so I can have that flexibility and find what I really want to do for the rest of my life. I'm a Questbridge and Gates scholar, so if you have any questions about that, please feel free to let me know. I'm first generation low income as well, so if you have any questions about that, also let me know. And yeah, I love poetry. I've published 2 poetry books for my club. And I'm also a part of the Mentorship Project, which is an organization that caters to underprivileged or under-resourced high school seniors. And I help with matching, and I do a lot of cool stuff with that program. So feel free to check them out or ask me if you have any questions about that organization. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you, Jennora. And so our next speaker will be Thuong.
Hi everyone, my name is Thuong. I'm a first year at Harvard University. I'm currently in St. Louis, Missouri, but I'm moving into campus on Sunday. I was born and raised in Vietnam and moved here when I was 14. So if any of you are immigrants or international student and you want to know more about like the process, definitely hit me up. I'm a Questbridge finalist and a GATE scholar like Jennora, my awesome friend. Let's see. I want to become a human rights lawyer with a focus on either immigration or criminal justice reform. I really love reading. It's my passion. I'm trying to see if I can start a bookstagram, but we'll see about that. I'm not very artistic. Yeah, very excited to be here, and I'm gonna give it up to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Valerie.
Hi guys, I'm Valerie. I am going to be in UPenn, well, technically at home, but UPenn class of 2024, and specifically I'll be in Wharton, where I'll be majoring in economics, and I'm also planning on majoring in design in the College of Arts and Sciences, so doing a double major. In school, I was involved in a lot of different things. So I was the editor-in-chief of our county paper, and I did dance captain for our theater program and also just dance outside of school. I like writing and art, so I've done some poetry and some art contests, and I was also in debate and DECA. So I'm really excited to be here today. If you have any questions about Penn specifically or business schools, that's kind of where my area of expertise is.
Okay, thank you, Valerie, and thank you so much for all our four speakers to be here today. And I believe like there will be really helpful information for you guys. So next we'll be moving to our Q&A. So we will having 6 questions from our participants, which are taken from the registration form that you guys fill in. And so we'll be going in a circle to answer the question, and the order will be like the introduction. So we will start with Janine, and then Jennora, and then Thuong, and then Valerie. And if you have any other questions that you want to ask, you can drop them in the chat, or you can open your mic to ask it at the end of this Q&A. So we will start with the first question. Okay, so number 1, please share your experience. What do you think gives you the competitive edge?
I think there are two probably main things that gave me a competitive edge in my application. The first one of them is being just like my essays, and specifically like something that I find that's really important in essays is like having like this like kind of the storytelling skills to go along with telling your narrative, I guess. So it's really just presenting. I feel like I presented myself in my essays the way that I look at myself rather than the way that I want other people to view me. And I feel like that was one of the things that set me apart. I've always loved writing ever since like middle school, elementary school, high school. So I took a lot of like AP English classes, and I really actually focused in those classes to make sure that I was learning all of the writing devices that would come in handy later. The second thing that I think gave me like the most competitive edge in my application, was that I did a lot of extracurriculars that aren't kind of typically expected of like the pre-law student or like the political science student normally. So when we think of like pre-law students, we think of people who normally did like debate in high school or mock trial, moot court, people who did stuff like that. And I never really did any of those like common law extracurriculars, I guess. I've always kind of known that I wanted to study the law and stuff like that, but I just never really took any extracurriculars that were specifically geared towards that. So instead, I literally just like did so much service work in things that I was super passionate about. So I'm really passionate about working with the youth and also advocating for animals, things like that. So I volunteered with the San Diego Zoo. I did public speaking as an ambassador. So I would basically go out into the zoo and give public presentations on conservation, sustainability, things like that. And then I would also volunteer with the youth through HOBie, which is this leadership program called Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership that really stresses empathy and understanding and leadership. And I also play the viola. So those things all do not line up specifically with like being a pre-law major, but that's the things that I think gave me a competitive edge on my application.
Similar to Janine, like I definitely think that it was my essays and my extracurriculars that really did get me into top colleges. I definitely think like with my essays, I was very unique and genuine. I know that like for certain supplements, like for U Chicago, I literally wrote an essay. Well, it was basically like a short story about me being catapulted to like an interdimensional U Chicago campus with Dr. Seuss as my tour guide and everyone walking in headstands. And I got in. So I think that like I was just super creative, and I really thought out of the box, but also I was making sure to convey my genuine self and making sure that every part of my application was dedicated to a different side of me. I did not have a spike. I did not have like a theme or I think it's called a spike. I think that's what people call it these days. But I did not have a theme. I literally showed every single part of me. I think I'm a super undecided person. So that was reflected in my extracurriculars, right? Like I did like a music production program that I found that I really loved. And then I also interned at hospitals. And then I volunteered at the 9/11 Museum. Like I did a lot of different things that I just genuinely felt passionate about and that I really loved. And I think that really conveyed just an image of myself that was genuine and real, but also something that like admissions officers like to see. So yeah, I definitely did a lot of things that I personally enjoyed, and using that to reflect in my application definitely helped me have a competitive edge, because in a sense I was able to sort of humanize myself, because I'm a human. I'm not just like a robot who only loves this one thing. And yeah, so just showing different parts of myself in my essays, being super creative, and again, like using that word, being genuine.
Yeah, to echo what Janine and Jennora said, definitely like to me, the essay is like a very important part of the application. For my essay specifically, I show a lot of like vulnerability in it, and I make sure to tie it up with like my background as an immigrant who came from who came from Vietnam, and how like my transition to like a predominantly white high school that doesn't have that many opportunities that cater to international student or just like a non-white students. So I make sure to show that through my essay. And honestly, like in your essays, do not be afraid to show your vulnerabilities. It is totally fine. Admissions officers want to know who you are as a person. They don't want the invincible, like no one can touch applicant. They want like what Jennora said, a human applicants. And so if your story will include like a part of you that is not like perfect, then it's totally fine to show it. Also, another thing I think that give me the competitive edge is the fact that I really try to make the most out of all the opportunities that were given to me. Like I mentioned, my freshman year, I was the only Asian student in my class of like 113, and so it was like super scary, and there wasn't like any clubs or activities that like cater to my like identity or like any of the things that interest me. So I founded like a cultural club at my school just so that like in later years when there are more minorities or like BIPOCs, like student in the BIPOC communities, like we have a place to stay on campus. And also like as an immigrant in St. Louis, it's not like opportunities are not super accessible, but I try my best to like find ways to keep myself involved in the community and keep busy. And so I think I translate that very well on my application as someone who will utilize every opportunities I'm given to make a difference in my community. And I think that's like I think it's something that admission officers really like.
I don't want to repeat too much of what people have said, but I personally also think my essay was one of my biggest parts of my application. And then my extracurriculars, like Jennora, I didn't have a spike at all, and that was something I was really concerned about. But it's just because I had too many interests. I like dance and debate and journalism and writing and theater, and there was too much, and I wasn't willing to give up anything. But that ended up playing in my favor because Penn specifically, at least, really values interdisciplinary students. And so that ended up working out really well for me. I think one thing that was kind of unique about my application that hasn't really been touched on yet is actually the interview. So the interview is a whole other thing. And for most schools, it's not a huge deal. Like, unless you completely bomb it, it's not going to really negatively affect you, nor is it really going to positively affect you. But for me personally, after I was accepted into Penn, my interviewer actually called me and mentioned that my interview really, really stood out to him, which is something that he reported back to the admissions office, in which case, like, he really emphasized that he thought I should get in. And so in specific cases, if you do really well, it can have a pretty big impact on your application because it's an alumni directly going to the admissions officer telling them you should accept this student. So I think that was something that was a little bit unique.
Thank you for the answers. So we will move to the second question, which is how to have or create a theme for your entire application.
Oh, hello. So I didn't really have like a traditional spike, but I do feel like I had a theme in that like most of my essays centered around like either like being vulnerable or showing vulnerability, and also like stressing empathy and conscious inclusivity and like not only like in like leadership and like being the leader of a club and such, but just like in traditional school settings, academia, daily life, anything like that. So I think like the theme for my entire application was more so centered on like, yeah, just like me being comfortable with vulnerability and me being comfortable being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like I made sure, or I talked a lot about like how the feeling of uncomfort like is truly like the catalyst for growth and like personal development and all of those things. So I feel like to create that theme, I didn't even like really go into my application thinking like, oh, this is like the specific theme I want to create. But it's kind of like as you start writing your essays about things that truly matter to you, there can be like common similarities between different essays, and you kind of, or like I just kind of like played those up. So yeah, I would say like in creating a theme, it's just you can find kind of little connections in the things that you choose to write about, because those are the things that you're passionate about. And I don't think your theme necessarily has to be like, oh, I'm a STEM major, or like, oh, I really like doing this specific class in school. Like it doesn't have to be academic per se. It can be more sort of based on your personality and just the way that you live your life. So yeah, that's my experience creating a theme for my application. But yeah, I wouldn't say that I necessarily, yeah, had a super specific theme. It was kind of like an overarching presentation of who my authentic self was. I wasn't trying to present a different, like a different image of myself than what is genuine and real.
Yeah. See, I mean, like what I said before, like I didn't really have a spike or like a theme for my application. So I can't really give like personal experience to this question. However, I will say that try not, like if you're thinking of having like a spike or a theme for your application, try not to force it upon your application, if that makes sense. Like it should be, like Janine said, like something that sort of kind of arises out of what you're writing, and your authentic self. So I definitely would say that, like, do you write like all the responses that you really want and that you really feel that you're really passionate about? And I think see what theme kind of comes from that. I think that's having that like in your head already, that like you want this theme to be a certain way. Like try to play with it and see what comes out of that and make sure that it's super authentic.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I really have a theme for my entire application. I know that my essays were very focusing on my like passion for social justice and human rights. Uh, but like also my extracurriculars don't necessarily really reflect that, because it's kind of all over the place. And I know I don't talk to my teachers about like social justice issues that often. So I'm pretty sure they don't really like talk about that in my application. So yeah, I don't think I have a theme, but like just on my essays alone, I guess admissions officers can like tell the type of, like can tell the way that I present myself, like type, or like tell the type of person I really want to be, or the type of student I'm gonna be on campus. Also, I agree with Janine that like a theme doesn't necessarily have to be like your academic interest. Like it, like actually, I think that a theme should never be just solely about your academic interest. It should be something about yourself. Because the thing about college is that most of you will come in undeclared, and you won't declare your major until like your sophomore year, either the fall or the spring. And so I don't think your major like weighed that much heavily in your application anyway. They're just really trying to figure out who you are. And so if you can like focus your essay, or like because your essay is like the best way that you can present your theme in your application, really. The other things that almost gonna be out of your control by now. But like your essay, if you can focus it on highlight certain personality traits of you or highlight your values, it's gonna be so much more like important. Yeah.
So I didn't really have a spike either, but I do want to say that while you might not want to write all your essays like about art or about soccer or something, it should still read like the same person has written all your essays, right? So your same like core values and key personality traits should shine through all of your essays and even your activities. And so for me, for my essays, one of my big personality traits that I wanted to show was that I'm very self-motivated and I find my opportunities myself, and I'm always willing to try new things. And so even though that's not a specific activity, that's kind of a theme, I guess, that could be seen through all of my essays, whether it was talking about myself or talking about what I wanted to do on campus. So that was something that was more common. But again, if you do have, like, if dance is your one and true passion and you spend 5 hours doing that every day and you want to make that your spike, I know people who did that as well and it worked really well for them. Just talk about why you're actually passionate about it, not just the awards that you got from it, not just the competitions that you won. Talk about like your personality and who you are. And the whole point of like essays, right, is to show that you're a person behind just the resume and just the paper. So I think even though I didn't have a spike, I know it does work for people. So if that's the route you want to go, then that works as well.
Thank you for all the answers. So now we'll be moving to the third question, which is how to engage admissions officers into your application without making it seem so centered on yourself.
Okay, so how to engage admissions officers into your application without making it seem so centered on yourself. I think part of this is about like the way that you write the essay itself. Like Valerie was saying, for example, like if you're someone who loves dance and like you spend like 5 hours a day on dance, if you're writing like a personal statement on dance and what it means to you, you shouldn't be like just listing off like the competitions and like the awards that you won, because that's not really what they're interested in. Like they're trying to read a personal insight question or a personal statement and not just like a resume list of all of your achievements. So I think you have to walk this very fine line of like, you have to present yourself in a way that obviously is ideal to admissions officers, but at the same time, you don't want to come across as like kind of hoity-toity or like braggy or anything like that. So I think to engage admissions officers into your application without making it seem so centered on yourself, you want to talk about kind of like your more vulnerable side and kind of like expose like the things that you're maybe not so confident about and like the process of you working on that and strengthening who you are as a person, without making it seem so centered on yourself. To do that, you can also talk more about like the impact of the things that you did rather than focusing on the actual thing. Like, for example, if you're someone who started a nonprofit, instead of talking about like the nonprofit itself, you can talk about like how it's impacted your community, how it's like helped the people around you, things like that. So that's my advice on that question.
Yeah, I definitely second what Janine said. I also think something that might help is just speaking through your experiences. You might have heard the thing called like show, not tell. I really think that's like an amazing piece of advice that I was given when I was writing my supplements and essays, because it's really helpful to just kind of start with an experience or go right into like an anecdote of something that you want to talk about. So then it's not necessarily about yourself, even though like it's an experience that you had, but you're kind of telling it in a way that's really descriptive and engaging without really centering it like I did this. Like, yes, you did this, but tell us more about what that experience held for you. And I think that would make it less centered on yourself, but also just about yourself. So you're engaging the admissions officer right at the same time. So I think that's like my best advice for that.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. Like anecdotes are the best when it comes to like like telling admission officers more about you. Also, another thing you can do is like highlight kind of like the influences that you've had, or like talk about your community or like your relationship with the community around you in your essay, because that's also another way that you can show like your impacts, or like how the environments around you impact you, how it shapes who you are. And like it's like a clever way to talk about you, but not so obvious. And so yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone has said, but I think it's also important to keep in mind that you are selling yourself. That's the whole point of your application. So don't be afraid to talk about yourself, to show who you are. Like every essay should be about you. And so even with the supplementos that are talking about like, you know, why do you like this school? You don't want to just talk about the great things about the school because they know that, like that's on their website. Talk about why you specifically would thrive at that school, what you would contribute. And also just keep in mind that like admissions officers like probably for these competitive universities spend like 10 to 15 minutes on each application, like maybe a minute on each essay. So they're not going to be getting bored of reading about you or anything like that. And you really want to just capture their attention in the fastest way possible. And so don't be afraid to talk about yourself and to show the best part of you. Like this is the one time you want to brag.
Okay, those are great answers. And so we'll be moving to the number 4 question. And for this question, number 4, 5, and 6 will be switching the order of speaking. So we will start with Valerie, and then Thuong, and then Jennora, and then Janene. Okay, so number 4 question is, what do you think admission officers most focus in your portfolio?
I think I saw this question in the chat too, like what's the most important part? And I know this answer is annoying, but there isn't like one part that's the most important. Your test scores and your grades matter to an extent, but if those aren't very strong, then your extracurriculars and your essays will matter a lot. And so honestly, admissions officers like seeing a well-rounded student. Like almost every school, they want a student who can study hard and get good grades, but also has a life outside of school and can make an impact in the community, has a lot of their own passions and their own hobbies. So there honestly isn't one focus. But if you are applying to college right now, like if you're a rising senior or a rising junior and you can't do much about your test scores or your grades, then I would say focus on your essays. I think that's a big part that you can really show something more about yourself than just listing awards.
Yeah, so like most of these schools, they said that they are holistic review. So basically, they'll look at your entire application. But like echo to what Valerie said, like maybe if you're like a rising senior, maybe for the junior, you guys have a little bit more time to take standardized testing. But for the seniors, a, and I know with like COVID, it's getting so difficult to just like schedule like an SAT or an ACT date, and then and it also like senior year is hard to just like focusing or like creating more extracurriculars, but like really focus on your essay, because in the end the essay is like really the part of the application that you have the most control over. And like when you think about it, I since like the admission officer spent like 10-15 minutes reading your essay, there's also like their way of getting to know you the most, because even when it comes to extracurricular, there are bound to be overlap between like different students, and so the essay is like the part that is uniquely you. I also think if you have like a chance to interview with like admission officers directly, then utilize that chance to like either highlight a specific part of your application that you're particularly proud of, or like use that part to like address any like weaknesses in your app that you don't have the space to explain for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would say that I believe like the most like significant part of your application is your essays, only because that's the main source of how like the officer kind of knows the way you write, or like um just it's the main source for me. It's like the main source of information that you're kind of getting from someone is like through their writing and through what they write about and through their story. That definitely deserves a lot of your time. I want to reassure people that like SAT scores and standardized tests matter as much as other parts of your applications. I will say like it can matter and it can help a lot if you get like a score, but I will say like I personally did not have as high SAT score. Like the schools that I got into, like my SAT scores were significantly lower than like the average. So I will say like, especially during this pandemic and like COVID and everything, with the canceling SATs, test taking and stuff like that, just be mindful that like the admissions officer about like COVID and everything that's going on. So I think maybe describing your circumstances, like, it's fine. I think the admissions officer will review your application holistically regardless. So yeah, that's essentially my answer.
Yeah, first off, I want to kind of emphasize what Jennora said. Like, honestly, like one bad grade or test score isn't really going to kill you. Like, I literally failed one of my AP tests straight up. So, like, it's never going to be like the kiss of death on your application. In my opinion, I think there are like two things that they focus on the most in your application or portfolio. The first one would, of course, be your essays, because when you see like your extracurriculars and your GPA and your test scores written down on a piece of paper, like it doesn't really mean much, but once you start talking about it in a meaningful way to your admissions officers in your essays, then they're going to start to piece together who you are and figure out like the type of student that you would be on their campus. The second thing I think they focus on a lot in all of their when they're reviewing all of the applications is they want to see that you have advantage taken advantage of all of the opportunities in that are available to you, like in your town, in your school, whatever. Because I'm not sure if this is the same for like every private school or every public school, but at least for Stanford, I know that there's an admissions officer that's kind of assigned to like every like geographical region. So like there's one from SoCal. So like obviously they know the type of school that you're coming from. They know the area that you're in. So they want to see that you're taking advantage of all the opportunities that are placed in front of you. So for example, does your school offer AP classes? Are you taking those? If your school doesn't offer AP classes and they instead offer like, for example, dual college credit classes, are you taking those? Just a bunch of things like that. They're trying to make sure that you're really proactive and that you're searching for and just like going for all of these opportunities that might be in your area.
Okay, thank you for all the questions. And we'll be moving to the fifth question, which is, what do you think about the difference between an impressive portfolio and a good portfolio?
I think we've said this so many times, but I just want to emphasize again, like so many people can do a ton of extracurriculars, but what will set you apart is if in your essay you show why you're passionate about what you're doing. And so it doesn't matter if there's 5 applicants who are all on the debate team. If you can say, well, I personally did debate, it helped me a lot with my confidence and my outlook on life, and you make it more personal, that's what will set you apart. And then also something that's a little bit more like technical, I guess, is having leadership roles. So not just joining a ton of clubs, but like focusing on a few and having leadership and getting higher in the ranks for those clubs that you actually care about. That can kind of set you apart too.
Yeah, and I think like if you can make sure to show like to be genuine in your application, but also show like a very special part of your person, like show your personality, your passion, your stories through your essay and your application. It's it's just amazing because like when you think about it, your college application has like accomplished its goal. It's like to tell tell admission officer about you, getting them to know who you are really. And I second Valerie. Leadership roles is important, but and let's see. Also, like if you can like show like an upward trend of things, like maybe if you're like your freshman sophomore years, you don't have a lot of leadership roles, but you get more of them like your junior or like senior years, then it's good. And also like that correlate with like grades like GPA. If you can like make sure to show like an upward trend, then it's better.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said. Again, like numbers are numbers, right? Like you can have a high number, someone can have the same high number, the same high stat, but it's really who you are that sets you apart and that makes you different applicants. Also, keep in mind that like admissions officers are looking at you in the context of like the challenges that you face, and like the resources or lack of resources that may be available to you. So somebody who is like first gen low income, doesn't have that many opportunities around them, but is still like at the top of their class, or they're still like doing amazing things in terms of extracurriculars, or trying their hardest, and taking advantage of like everything that they can take advantage of, like that can seem like a more impressive applicant than someone who doesn't have those same challenges. So also keep in mind of the challenges you may face and how that might factor in to your application as well. Like, don't be super discouraged. Like, again, applicants are different based on who they are and what they're doing. Yeah.
I know that we've talked a lot about essays, but to me, honestly, I feel like an essay can really make or break a portfolio or an application. I've read a lot of essays, I've wrote a lot of them, and all of the ones that I've personally read that I've really enjoyed are ones that have like a really strong like introduction and conclusion. I feel like a lot of people write really similar body paragraphs, but your introduction and conclusion, if you pick like a, for example, like if you picked a really interesting anecdote from when you were a kid, and you really kind of like expand on that and kind of circle back to that at the end of the essay, it can make for a really, really strong and impactful essay. Like after I got admitted in the Stanford group chat for the admits, we would always joke around like, okay guys, what quirky food item did you write about on your application? And like that's like such a like niche thing, but it's honestly like in my case that it was true. Like I literally wrote one of my essays about like how my greatest talent is making mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving time. Like if you're able to find those like little anecdotes that you can make really interesting and really thoughtful, I think that's one of the things that can really kind of give your portfolio or application or whatever you want to call it like an extra edge.
Okay, and we'll move to the last question of the Q&A. So number 6, how can students improve their portfolios or make them stand out? And any tips or recommendation?
I feel like we've kind of encompassed a lot of our tips on how to make yourself stand out. I think if I had one tip, it'd just be don't be afraid to be unique or be different, whether that is in your activities. So maybe if you don't do a ton of clubs at school, but you found a really cool local nonprofit that you are heavily involved in, like don't be afraid to talk about that. Or if you're like for your essay, if you don't want to follow a traditional like 5-paragraph format, which I encourage, like definitely go out of the box with organization of your essay. I started off my essay with like a schedule, like I literally wrote like 9 o'clock I did this, 11 o'clock I did this, and it flowed into the rest of my essay, but I think that kind of made it stand out a little bit. So I'd say just, yes, it's good to take advice from people and it's good to look at what a lot of high achieving students are doing, but don't afraid to go out of the box and make it your own.
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is just like, don't be afraid to show who you are. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable in your application, especially in your essay. Like I said, like there are definitely like things that you don't want colleges to know, but like if it's like a very big part of who you are, then don't, and like you, and if you're afraid that it might not be like this super awesome sunshiny picture, it's gonna be like, it's kind of like a little bit negative, it's a little bit like vulnerable, it's okay, you can show it. And like, and if you want to do that but you're afraid on like how to approach it, then my advice is to focusing on like you how you try to overcome all of the challenges that you face, and like how the adversary that you face in your life so far has helped you to be a better person, or how that inform your viewpoint and how that inform like your goals for the future. But yeah, like don't be afraid to be genuine, or don't be afraid to show vulnerabilities, because like I said, it humanizes you so much. And in the end, colleges are looking for human students, not perfect applicants with perfect stats.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also think like I know like I've mentored some students and they didn't like include, or they were like shying away from including certain extracurriculars. I will say include everything that you can, especially like if you have family responsibilities or things that are not like traditional extracurriculars. Include that. They all contribute to your application. They all contribute to how the admissions officer will like look at you and your image. I also want to say, like, have fun with your application. Like, it's like a college application and it can be like stressful and like annoying, but I do think like the essays that I had fun writing or I had fun like reading over and I genuinely enjoyed them, like those are like my best supplements, those are my best essays. I think coming out that you genuinely like is really important, because then even if you end up getting rejected from the cover, like you still know that you put in your best, you put your best foot forward and you liked your application, and that's really what matters. So I definitely say have fun with it.
My biggest piece of advice would be to know what advice to take. And I know that sounds really confusing, but especially when it comes to essay writing time, you're going to be really confused because there are some people who will show their essay to absolutely everybody and show it to all of their teachers and literally everybody they know. And there's going to be other people who just don't show them to anybody. My advice particularly would be to show your essays to people who know you very, very well, and also to people who are not afraid to call you out. Like, show them to people who are not afraid to tell you, like, hey, like, you're kind of like representing a false image of yourself, like blah, 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 blah. You really need to have people who will give you honest feedback on your essays. That's my biggest piece of advice. I think for me, I had like my sister read it, and then my mom, and then like I think one close friend. And I really think that was one of the things that helped me when I was writing my essays, because it gets to a point where when you ask so many people like for advice on your essays and you're taking all of that advice and changing your essay, you're kind of diluting your own writing voice and your own style, and that's really what they want to see at the end of the day. So you want to choose readers who will refine your essay but not completely rewrite it or restructure it for you. The bulk of what you're saying in your essay should be what you are saying, not what other people are kind of throwing in there, you know? So that's my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you so much for all the answers and the questions from our participants. So next, we have finished all of the 6 questions from the Q&A, and so now we'll be moving through the question in the chat, or you can open your mic to ask the question. So let's look at the chat and see what question do we have. So the first question, I think this question is for Thuong because she's an international student. So a question from Samya: external financial aid for international students who wants to study in USA.
Yes. So I know for like international student, it's honestly so stressful when it comes to financial aid and scholarships, because most of the time they are not for us. But like my tactic when it comes to this is that I look for schools that will meet 100% of demonstrated need, and like most of the time this includes their like international student also, and like liberal arts colleges. Oh my gosh, the financial aids are like god tired, so you should definitely check them out. Like I know a lot of the ivies also have very good financial aid for international students. If you can, like look up local scholarships, like it could be only like $500 to like 1,000, but like if you apply to a bunch of them, like and you get them, like it adds up, and before you know it you have like a lot of refunds from your school from your outside scholarships.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to the second question because I noticed there are like a lot of questions in the chat. So for each question, we will only have one speaker answering them so that we can answer most of the questions that we have. So the second question, which is, how do you guys write the essay? Do you refer to any material just to get some idea or anything? And is there any speakers who want to answer this question?
I can take this one. So for the essay, what I did was I brainstormed the qualities of myself that I really wanted to show through my essay that were really important. So for me, that was being like very driven and then kind and caring. And so kind of when I had that, I had another list of like anecdotes about myself, like stuff that really stood out to me, whether it was an experience I had that was really unique or just one normal day that like I remember really vividly for whatever reason. And then I just like wrote from there. And so I read some other people's essays just to kind of see what they're about, but really I just looked at my own experiences and I just started writing. And I did that for a bunch of different ideas. And then I kind of saw one that very clearly like was the easiest for me to write and I saw I could develop it a lot. And that's the one I ended up going with. So I'd say don't be afraid to write out a bunch of drafts of totally different ideas and then just figure out which one like fits the most and is the most comfortable to write about.
Thanks, Valerie. And I missed a question from Kushi. So there's another question. What do you think is the most important component to an applicant? Any speaker want to answer this question?
I think we kind of talked about this already, but there's no like one most important part. Like Valerie was saying, like if you're kind of maybe like lacking in one, not lacking, but maybe like you're not within the percentile range for like a certain test score, like an SAT score, something like that, you can always compensate with an essay. So I feel like essays and taking advantage of the opportunities that are around you are really important. But yeah, I feel like we kind of already kind of touched on that question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will not ask the question that is already answered or asked by other participants. So the next question is from Carolyn. So she said that I don't have a strong SAT score, but yet I want to apply to UT Austin, which is considered a public Ivy League school. What should I work on to win over my application? Is there any?
I I didn't apply. I didn't apply to UT. So I don't have like again like direct experience for this, but I will say like I will second what we have been saying in this presentation, which is try to focus on all of your application, including your writing, your essays, and make sure you showcase yourself through those other sections of the application. I think honestly, like again, like as we said earlier, like as I said earlier, like SAT scores aren't that big of a big part of your application, I feel like. So again, just showcasing yourself through your writing and making sure that you're being authentic and humanizing yourself through.
Okay, another question from Alyssa. So how did you calculate hours per week and number of weeks for your activities section? Because I feel like you can never be entirely accurate. How do you get an interview at a school? Do they contact you first if they're interested? Or do they do every student? Or do you have to contact them?
Okay, I can answer this. So for the first part, like the hours for activities, it's really just like you just like do the average because I know a lot of my activities, like even though they're year round, there are certain months when I have to like do them like every day after school and like the hours are like insanely high. That's for that 1 month, but then like the rest of the year, like we have a meeting once a month. But so just try to do the average and if you want like in when you describe the activity you can like explain it further like for me like when I do mock trial I says that the average is like 2 hours a week but then like from October to February we have like practices 6 hours a week every week for competition. So like if you're worried about like trying to accurately represent the numbers for activities that's one what like that's how you do it. In regarding to interview, each school has a different policy. Some school you will have to reach out for them to request an interview, and like a lot of them have like a specific date. Also, I know Rise has like a priority deadline to request interview, and also like a regular decision deadline. some other school, they will reach out to all applicants for like interview. I know like a lot of like, or like based on like alumni availability. So I know like a lot of like the Ivy League schools do that sort of things. And sometimes if you have like a highly concentrated numbers of alumni in an area, they will host like an interview day, where like they invite all the applicants to come to like for me it was like at a local high school, and they just like take turn interviewing all the students. So it really depends. If you want, definitely look up the interview policy at the school that you're interested in applying. Make sure that you keep track of all the deadlines or all the things that you need to do in order to get an interview.
Thanks for the answer. So there are two questions about the AP from Michelle and Rubabali. So they are, did you submit all your AP scores? And if you didn't go do as well on an AP test, should you take the subject test for that subject, especially if that subject is related to your future career?
Since I failed an AP test, I feel like I should take this one. No, I did not send in my failed AP test score because like I feel like if you don't send it in, they kind of assume that you failed, but like there's some room for, maybe they assume like you just didn't take it or something. But I did not send that in. It was an AP Physics C, by the way, not my thing. If you didn't do as well as an AP test, should you take the subject test for that subject, especially if that subject is related to your future career? Okay, for me personally, hot take, I guess, I don't really strongly believe in subject tests if you're already like taking AP tests or AP courses or college courses, dual credit courses, honors courses, things like that. Because for example, let's say I know SAT Math 2 or something is a very, very common subject test for SAT. And a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to score like a perfect 800 because most of the kids take it, like there's this perceived notion that like if you don't get an 800, then you're going to end up in like a lower percentile and it's going to look bad. But honestly, I feel like, for example, if you take honors math courses or if you take upper level math courses or AP math courses, you shouldn't have to, or you aren't required to then take an additional subject test beyond that, because it's like, okay, they kind of understand that you can do math, if that makes sense. So if I would say like the only case that I would really take a subject test in is if number one, some schools require it, some schools do require a subject test, or they highly recommend it. And number two, if you have a fee waiver and you're confident in your abilities to do well on the test. But honestly, I don't think that any subject test of any kind is really super necessary.
Thanks, Jenny. So the next question is from Streja. So my school is really competitive and only the top 10% get ranked, and I'm not in the top 10%, so I don't know my rank. Would that look a bit bad for more competitive colleges? Is there any speakers that want to answer this question?
I mean, it's not gonna. The thing about colleges is that, especially competitive colleges, is that they do like a holistic review. So even if you feel like your GPA or like your stats like is not in the top 10%, it's not gonna be the thing that like make or break your application. There are other things about your application that admission officer will look at and evaluate your in like deciding whether or not to admit. But honestly, I wouldn't worry too about it.
Thank you. And there are two questions about essay. So one is from Carolyn, which is, can I use two different anecdotes in one essay that have common theme to show one side of my personality? And the second question from Elisa, which is, best metaphors you have heard.
So I think you can definitely use two anecdotes in one essay. That's kind of what I did. I didn't focus my whole essay on one story, especially if you're using it to show the same point. So I'd say definitely don't be afraid to do that as long as the flow is still good and they connect. And then best metaphor you've heard. I'm assuming this means like an anecdote for your essay. So I can tell you one of my best friends wrote her essay about brownies, and she talked about how she loved baking brownies and everyone loved them, and like she could sell them because they were so good, but she could never bake chocolate chip cookies well. And so the metaphor for that was that she had to learn that there were just some things she could never do well, that she should just focus on the things she could do well and keep trying and learn do different things and not focus on the one thing that you can't do bad. So I thought that was a pretty creative metaphor.
Thanks, Valerie. So our next question is from Samya. So, does having a lot of good extracurriculars in senior year look bad? I had family problems in first year and junior year, so couldn't do much at that time.
I'd say it doesn't look bad as long as there are things that you like generally like to do. Like I'd say it's a waste of time to do extracurriculars just for your college application. Like make sure to do extracurriculars like for yourself. And also like for your family like situation, I definitely say you might want to write that in the additional information section on your Common App and just let them know that that's why you didn't do extracurriculars or whatever happened. Yeah, so I would say it doesn't look bad as long as you let them know your circumstances and do things that you think are best for you.
Okay, so thank you, Jennora. And next question is also about essays. So it's from Samya. Can any of you guys talk about a vulnerable essay, writing about a negative thing that happened in your life, like death or anything else, and how to write something like that? And there's also another question about essay from Carolyn, which is example of how you can use quirky anecdote like mashed potato story to show your personality. I have fun stories to tell, but I don't know how to show myself while telling them how I possibly help that situation.
Okay, so I actually wrote about literally both of those things. Like, I wrote about the passing of my grandmother. So I am a first-gen Asian American. I'm the daughter of two genocide refugees from Cambodia. But growing up, my parents really put a lot of not a lot of pressure, but they really wanted me and my sister to assimilate as well as we could to American society. So I didn't grow up speaking my native language, and my grandmother, who had recently passed, only spoke our native language. So there was a lot of kind of disconnect from both her and my identity as a Cambodian growing up. So I talked about that a lot in my essay, and I talked about how I decided to give a eulogy at her funeral in our native language, kind of as an homage to her. And I worked on that eulogy with my other grandparents. So we worked on learning the language, intonation of the language, how to say things, how to translate things from English to Khmer, which is my native language. And that process really taught me a lot about grit and how I personally like to embrace challenge that holds really intense personal meaning for me. So that's how I talked about a very vulnerable or negative thing in my life, I guess. It wasn't really negative, but I guess it was something that started off negative, but the more that I worked on it and the more that I kind of delved deeper into learning my language, I was able to learn more about my personal identity as a Cambodian American and not just an American or a Cambodian. An example of my mashed potato story. So I think this was literally a UC personal insight question. They asked like, what is your greatest talent or accomplishment or something like that? And so I said that, like in my introduction, my personal anecdote was that my greatest talent was making mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving and watching all the little kids in my family like run to the dining room table and like take a huge heaping spoon of it and just eat it plain. And then in the body of my in the body of my essay, I talked about how what I'm really passionate about is bringing people together, whether that be through mashed potatoes, whether that be through, I talked about my volunteer work at the San Diego Zoo, doing public advocacy work for topics like conservation and sustainability. I talked about how speaking on a platform and how speaking about things that I cared about and watching families gather around my public presentations about conservation, sustainability, recycling, composting, how that really is what I'm passionate about. And then I further talked about how I also am really passionate about bringing people together through conscious inclusivity. And I talked about how when I was running for and for the duration that I was president of my school's academic league chapter, I really focused on creating a club environment that was welcoming not only to the varsity upperclassmen players, but also to the freshmen, to the upperclassmen that were walking into a club and just wanted to have fun answering some academic decathlon questions. I talked about how it was really important for me to create a welcoming and warm environment, whether that be through public speaking at the zoo, through conscious inclusivity in my academic league meeting, or through making mashed potatoes. So that was a way that I kind of tied it all together with a quirky, I guess, introduction.
Thank you, Janine. And our webinar is supposed to end at 7:38 p.m. However, I noticed that there are so many questions, and if our speakers can stay a little bit longer, then that would be great so that we can answer around 3 to 4 more questions. And if you have to leave, then just tell me in the chat so that I know before it. And also, if any participants cannot stay in the webinar, you can leave this webinar. And so there is another question that I missed from Carolyn. So the question is, what do you think helped you stand out on your interview?
So since I brought up the interview, I'll kind of talk about this, and then I actually do have to leave because I have a college orientation meeting. But for the interview, it depends on your interviewer as well. But what I found was that every interview I walked into, the interviewer had like a list of questions that they'd prepared. And it was kind of like, what is your extracurriculars? And like, what are some challenges you faced? Like the really classic questions. And so if you get one of those interviewers, my advice would be to don't just answer the question in like 1 or 2 sentences, because most of the stuff is on your application already. Try to go a little bit further, explain something that you want to explain, or if there's an activity you really care about, talk about that a little bit more, and then talk about things that weren't on your application. I think almost every single interviewer asked me what's something that wasn't on your application. So definitely have an answer for that. And then the one thing I will say is that for my UPenn interview, he walked in and he was an older man, like he had graduated decades ago. And so I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to relate to him. But he saw that I was reading Huckleberry Finn because I was waiting for him. And we started a conversation about the book. And then for the next like hour and a half, we just talked about books and writing and different authors we loved. And that was our entire interview. He never asked me about my extracurriculars or academics or anything like that. We just had a conversation. He was like, I can tell you're really passionate about these things. You have a lot of unique ideas. And I think that was what made me stand out. So it depends on your interviewer, but just don't be afraid to go a little bit further. They'll all say this, but it's meant to be a conversation between the two of you, not like a question and answer. And I'm also going to leave my email in the chat in case anyone has any questions or wants me to look over essays, anything like that. But it was so nice being here today.
Thank you so much, Valerie, and thank you so much for everyone who joined this webinar. And if you have to leave, and so we will continue with our questions. So the next question is from Anna. So how to stand out if your essay topic sounds stereotypical, like if you are an immigrant?
Okay, I can take this since my essay, like one of my essays, literally about like my immigrant identity, and I don't know, like after I wrote it, I found out that it's actually not that unique topic, not that's unique of a topic. However, I feel like the thing is that you're right. There's a lot of like immigrants or like international student applying to U.S. colleges, and on the surface, like our experience are very similar. But the thing is that how you respond to your experience or like the lessons that you have that you get from them are very like depends on you. It's very unique. So definitely one way to tackle those essay is that instead of focusing on like the experience itself, focus on how you respond to it and like the lessons that you take from it, how like maybe moving from like your home country to a predominantly white community or like a whole new environment impacts you, how that makes you, how that like inform what you want in your future. And also another thing is that if you worry about like the content would be like very similar, then work on the format, because colleges like college essays, they don't spend that much time on it. And so like if the content gonna be like similar to other people, but like you can make sure that your intro and like your like conclusion is like super unique, or like something that like definitely draws their attention, then consider it a win, because that's like awesome.
Thank you, Thu. And so we will have three more questions. So the first question is from Adil. So what can a student who goes to a school whose system doesn't offer an AP classes and IB diploma, do you make their stats look good?
Okay, so my school, um, well, my school doesn't have APs or IB or anything like that, but it does have dual enrollment, so I was able to take college classes from that. But I will say that, like, again, like, admissions officers will look at your circumstances. I don't know if there's an opportunity to submit like a school profile, or maybe your counselor does that. But so that the admissions officer can see your circumstances, I think honestly take all the opportunities you have that are available to you and try to do your best with that. And that's literally all you can do. An admissions officer will look at you holistically and make sure that like they'll understand you, so you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the second question is from Samya. So how can an international student who hasn't got any waiver till now, SAT waiver or something, get common application fee waiver?
So it depends. Like I know some at some school, like your counselor, when they upload your like report, you can ask them to like sign a paper that's basically saying that you're low income and you need fee waiver. Or like if that's not an option, you can just email them like, hey, I really like your school, but I can't afford application fee, can you just waive it? And like I've been told that that actually works. So you know what, worst come to worst, just like email them, and yeah, they're probably not gonna, yeah, and they're probably gonna grant you the fee waivers.
Thank you. And we have actually two more questions from Makada D. So will I be able to send any of you my essay to look over?
um there's like a lot of services out there are offering like free help, especially for essay. For I know like Notable Narrative, I'm gonna put in chat. They are like a free, they're like a student run organization that are like offering free help with essays for like a first gen low income students. So if that applies to you, like definitely check them out. They're on Instagram. I'm currently like, if you want, you can email me your essay. I can't promise that I'm gonna like get them edited to you super fast, because like school's starting for me and I haven't figured out my schedule yet. But like if you can send them to me, and you're willing to wait like 1 to 2 weeks, then yeah, I can definitely read them or check them out for you.
Yeah, same for me. I'm really busy currently, but if you send me your essay, I will try my best to look over it as soon as I can.
Same, like I think we're all open to looking over essays super quick, but again, like I want to emphasize that like primarily the people who are editing or helping you edit your essays should be people that know you / are close to you, just so that you're putting out a not only positive but accurate representation of yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, the notable narratives, there is one speaker from in our webinar is from notable narrative. So if you joined the webinar yesterday or the day before, you will meet her. She's Celso. So if you need, I can send you an email with like the information. And I also know that like she said that that organization, they mostly help students who are like in low income family or who are in like the minority. So if like you are not in that group, then they might consider you, but they will like prioritize people who really need help. And also this is our last question. So should I report threes on AP exams?
I say that you should, just because in a lot of cases it can count towards college credit. So I think it's always a good thing to send in scores that are passing.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our webinar today. So that is like, I think all of the questions that I can see in the chat. And if you have any other questions that are not answered in this webinar, please let us know by like email us on Gmail, or you can contact us on Instagram. And I think like some speakers also left their contact here in the chat so that you can reach out to them if you need help with anything. And thank you so much for joining this webinar. I really appreciate that. And I hope like you guys got help a lot with your college admission process. And especially thanks to our speakers today for coming and like spending like more time than you should be in these webinars. So like, yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah, have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Good luck,
everyone.
everyone.